Thank you everyone for joining. Good morning and welcome to Deloitte Disability in DC Metro Veteran Mental Health event. My name is Gifty Murray and I'll be your Zoom producer for today's webinar. At this time, I'd like to share a few reminders. This is a 2-hour webcast in length and is being recorded. All attendees will be in listen-only mode for the duration of the event. We have disabled the chat and Q&A features for this webinar. If you do have questions or comments to share with our speakers, please email these over to our team and we'll follow up with you. Closed caption is available on today's call by selecting the live transcript option in the bottom ribbon of your Zoom screen. American Sign Language interpreters will also be present throughout. With that, Megan, you may begin.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. My name is Megan LeMay. I'm very excited to be here with you today. I have a background in clinical psychology and suicide prevention, and I work on a number of behavioral health and human performance optimization focused efforts for the military connected community. A quick physical description for the visually impaired. I am a female with dark hair and wearing a green blazer. And I'm going to quickly read through some standard disclaimer language that we have on the next slide here. Oh, one more. Wonderful. So just wanted to call out that the opinions expressed here today do not necessarily represent the official policy of the DoD, VA, or our respective employers. And further, the individuals on this panel are not providing counseling services or medical advice. Today's discussion is for general informational purposes only. So with that, I am very excited to kick things off and pass it over to Ms. Andrea Hall, the immediate past chair of disability in DC Metro. Andrea, over to you.
Great, thank you so much and welcome everyone. So today, in honor of Veterans Day this month, we are pleased to share with you this webinar. It's one in a two-part series being brought to you this month, which we are extremely excited to be co-hosting with Deloitte. My name is Andrea Hall. I'm a white female in a black shirt with glasses and dark hair, and I'm honored to have served as the last chair of the board of directors at Disability in DC Metro. The DC Metro chapter of Disability In is a nonprofit business-led network. We engage employers in a dialogue through education and resources with a focus on removing attitudinal and organizational barriers by exchanging best practices to ensure that talent with disabilities are included in today's workforce, marketplace, and as entrepreneurs. I'd like to express my sincerest thanks to our co-host Deloitte, whose leadership for many years has been active on our board of directors, to include currently Ryan Walters. Ryan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and thank you everybody for joining us today. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a few thank yous for individuals that made today possible. So Catherine McCary, who wasn't able to join us today, is the CEO of Disability in DC Metro. And she was a major influencer in helping us get this event off the ground. So I wanted to say thank you to Catherine for her leadership on this. Another person who has been an instrumental architect in this event is Ron Drosh. He's on the advisory board of Disability in DC Metro and has been for many years, along with his consulting business within the DC area. And then two other individuals from our Deloitte team. So Dave Haraska is a consultant under Deloitte who has helped us behind the scenes on putting this event together today. So everything you see here, he had a part in. So thank you, Dave. And lastly, Megan LeMay. You've already met Megan, and she's a specialist master with us at Deloitte, but she has been absolutely instrumental in bringing this event today to life. So thank you for all of that, hard work to that team and to everybody involved today, our panelists especially, and our moderators. We could not do this without you. So really appreciate all of your leadership and support to date and today. So with that, I do want to turn it over to our first speaker, Miss Jackie Winters, who is Deloitte's national leader for our community of people with disabilities and allies. So with that, Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. And thank you, Ryan, for the warm introduction. And thank you especially for guiding us and helping us to champion our relationship with disability and helping us to set up this series that we're very proud of. So my name is Jackie Winters. I am a principal in Deloitte Consulting's government and public services practice. I am a Caucasian woman with shoulder-length brown hair, and I'm broadcasting to you today from my living room in Northern Virginia. In addition to my practice role, I also, as Ryan mentioned, serve as the U.S. national leader for people with disabilities and allies. And in this role, I get the terrific opportunity to shape our disability inclusion strategy and work with leaders and practitioners across the firm to promote inclusive practices and accessibility, and to support all of those people who identify as having a disability or those people who identify as an ally. I also get to engage with partners across industry and government who similarly see this as a priority for their business and to share leading practices like we are going to today. Today is one of those terrific opportunities where we get to connect with what looks like several hundred people to talk about how the very important intersection of supporting our veterans and supporting people with disabilities is critical to our success. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. We have a wide group of people who are going to really help us to have this conversation about mental health and supporting our veterans in the workplace and considering creating more inclusive, supportive, and accessible workplaces. I come from a family of veterans. Both of my parents, as well as both of my brothers, served. And this topic, I think, is critically important to all of us. One of the most difficult days of our life was actually losing my mother's brother, who was also a combat veteran, to suicide 30 years ago after he served very honorably. And so it's important for us to really be able to have open and honest dialogues about what we can do as employers in the workplace to support all people, and particularly people who may be addressing challenges around mental health. And we're in a unique time where and how we work has shifted dramatically during this pandemic from a workplace that was primarily in offices and now is largely remote. This change was disruptive for everyone and difficult to navigate, but as we focus on people who identify as having a disability, it's important to consider those intersections and those unique challenges. One intersection, as we mentioned, is with our veterans community, including wounded, ill, and injured veterans. And as employers have learned to navigate the pandemic, supporting the mental health needs has continued to evolve in how we approach it. And it's a paramount topic for us when we talk about inclusive and accessible workplaces. In my role as our national leader for the people with disabilities and allies community, I've been focused on creating inclusive spaces and promoting authentic conversations around these changers and these stressors in the virtual environment. This intersection will continue to be a key driver for our conversations. The realization around intersections and that no single identity defines our people is a really important one for us to reflect on. To put this in perspective, about 2.7% of our Deloitte US workforce identifies as veteran. What's more, 1 in 4 adults are estimated to have a disability. So we understand that supporting the mental health needs of the individuals at this particular intersection is really important, especially when you think about the role of the workplace as a key contributor to a practitioner's well-being. Employers and workforce leaders, some of whom have never experienced military service firsthand, play an important role in supporting mental health for the military-connected community. About half of veterans report chronic physical conditions, and about 1/3 report chronic mental health conditions, including chronic pain, sleep problems, anxiety, and depression. These veterans are also bringing remarkable strengths to our workplace. They include problem-solving skills, adaptive flexibility, resilience. And it's important that we as leaders within all employer organizations educate ourselves on the perceptions and the needs and to work collaboratively to build solutions to support well-being and to foster the capacity for individuals to show up authentically. In fact, some research shows that the connection to the labor force supports successful transition from military to civilian life. Yet almost half of our post 9/11 veterans indicate that finding a job is their biggest challenge. So we'll be discussing that topic in even greater detail in tomorrow's webinar, and we hope you will join us then. Employers have the opportunity to provide supports upstream to help address issues and to help to prevent more serious downstream outcomes for employees. In fact, most organizations implemented cost-saving measures last year. 46% of organizations increased their well-being budgets relative to 2019. 64% of organizations introduced a new well-being offering in 2020. This demonstrates the recognition that the investment in talent through mental health supports is a critical component of organization success. Deloitte is continuing to focus on delivering mental health support services to our practitioners as we navigate the pandemic and continue our focus on coming through this time. For example, our firm hosted Mental Health Awareness Month in May, as we do each year, and we held approximately 25 different talks around things from grief, resilience, mindfulness, civil discourse, straight talk sessions, and distributed communications, podcasts, articles, and trainings for our people. We recognize that there will be an ongoing support need, and as we think through our mental health considerations and potential return to office and our strategies going forward. We're so excited to be here with our partners from Disability In. Since 2015, we've been working with disability to drive positive change across a wide spectrum of areas, including neurodiversity, veterans, and mental health. We've worked with other leaders through disability and committees and have continued to discuss things such as global accessibility. One of the leaders who you'll hear from today, Dan Pelton, has engaged in multiple mental health discussions at Disability's annual conferences. So we're looking forward to this as part of an ongoing set of dialogues. So with that, I would like to welcome our keynote for the day, Dr. Matt Miller. It's with great excitement that we have Dr. Miller here to talk to us and to help to address many of these topics that I've introduced. Dr. Miller is the Executive Director for the National VA Suicide Prevention, as well as the Acting Executive Director of Prevent's Office Mental Health and Suicide Prevention with the Veterans Health Administration Department of Veteran Affairs. Dr. Miller, over to you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. It's very nice to be here with you today. I actually, that was in doubt, so that's a very genuine statement. It was going to be in the air during this time, but it worked out that that I can be here. And again, extremely grateful for that. Consistent with the presentation theme thus far, I'll just quickly say I'm a Caucasian male with brown hair that is showing signs of turning gray here in the near future. And I decided to eschew the tie, just went with the button down with a vest and a sport coat. I have Uncle Sam in the background pointing and saying, "I want you." I've had that in my room since I was 7 years old and got it from the United States Air Force Museum on my birthday when I was a kid, when my parents took me there. That actually leads and plays into why I'm so excited to be here with you today, because we're talking about the intersection, the relationship between work, career, mental health, suicide prevention, and veterans. My story in that array of variables is the tale of two cities, if you will, and it includes the best of times and the worst of times. There's the by the book version, and then there's the second version that I'm currently in. The by the book version, I actually went to school to study psychology because I was most interested in, believe it or not, career and occupational development and matching. And how do you find the best career? How do you match people and persons with work environment, work tasks, personality of the workplace with personality of the individual, and to achieve maximum outcomes for both the person and for the workplace? That's actually then what my dissertation took a look at. So it was very formulaic. That's how career development went. It was an issue of matching, and pretty straightforward then within that. Now enter the second version, and the second version is career development and work by instead of by the book, let's call it by life happens. So I joined the United States Air Force as a clinical psychologist and an officer. And I was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio, as a resident. Completed my residency, and you come to this point in the process called match day. And that makes sense. That's what I studied. I told you in my dissertation. So yeah, let's match the next assignment with my preferences, my personality, what's going to be best. So you get a list, and I got a list, I think, of 25 installations that I could be assigned to. And my job was to rank order them. So I researched it. I did everything I learned to do in grad school with occupational matching and career development. I had my nice tight list of 25. I turned it in. Well, match day came, and you stand in your commanding officer's, in this case, office, and you receive your assignment. You're standing at attention. And so it was my turn. I walked in, I saluted, I stood at attention, and my colonel said, are you ready to receive your assignment? Which was kind of a bad sign from the outset to me. But I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, you're being assigned to Vance Air Force Base in Enid, Oklahoma. And I just remember so many thoughts going through my head at that time. They included some things I could share and some things I won't share. But the biggest question was, where was that on my list? Well, as it turned out, it wasn't on my list. And my colonel must have seen the look on my face. And she said, Matt, at ease, sit down, let's talk. And then she told me, you were assigned to this base because you're going to be the only active duty mental health professional there. And you're going to be working with joint services and international pilot trainees. And you're going to have to cover everything from suicide to prevention to inpatient admission and hospitalization to the contractors, the subcontractors. It's you. And we're trusting you with this. And it kind of felt like, when you're talking to someone when you're young and they're giving you this is in your best interest sort of speech. I appreciated her words, but her words were, this is a privilege. You'll thank us for it. And this is this is the perfect match for you. Well, I didn't believe it because it didn't meet my formula. But I went to Vance, and, you know, fast forward 3 years and my assignment was complete there. And it was indeed a blessing, an honor, a privilege, and the best match for me. And the books were out the window with that. But it was also the best of times and the worst of times. We were at the outset of OEF, OIF. It was post 9/11. And we had pilots in and out every 6 weeks classes, training to be fighter and bomber pilots, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and international. And the pace was something. My two best friends were Marine Cobra drivers that were flight commanders there, and came to the end of the 3 years of working together, being together in that environment and mission. And one of my friends, John, was tapped for redeployment in the Cobra unit. So he went back to 29 Palms for requal. Found out a month, 2 months later, something along those lines, got a call that John died by suicide in VOQ. That to me took me back to the colonel's room and office and saying, we're trusting you. This is an assignment for you. And all the successes that I had in the 3 years there vanished immediately. And then I got a call from Ray, my other friend, the Cobra driver, and he said, did you hear? I said, yeah, stammered it out. And he said, did you know? That to this day is still one of the most haunting questions, and one then that I took several years to wrestle with, including wrestling with career development and going through some times when I was lost within career development, going through some times where I didn't have direction. I just knew I didn't want to do mental health and psychology. I sold shoes for a while. And that's what I needed to do to keep my head afloat and work through some things. That led to a night watching 60 Minutes of all things. And it was a special on veteran suicide. And it didn't go well. It wasn't a good episode. And I sat there and I thought, this is it, Matt. It's time. Either you're going to jump back in and do something or not. So I acted immediately. I put in a resume, didn't know what I was doing, ended up as chief of mental health at VA in Michigan. And that led to director of the Veterans Crisis Line nationally. And that led to where I'm at now as the director of suicide prevention. Now, how does this apply to veterans as a whole? There's a by the book, and there's a by life happens for veterans as a whole too. And there's that process of navigating it. You may find yourself traveling with a veteran who's somewhere in that process. Let's go to the ultimate question, though, in my field, and that's suicide prevention. And the ultimate question is, why suicide? Why does it happen? This is important to understand, I think, for you then to come back and us to circle about the meaning of work and the importance of the workplace for veterans. The answer to the question is complex, but let me boil it down to this. In many ways, it's an issue of risk versus protective factors. As protective factors outweigh risk factors, suicide risk goes down. As risk factors outweigh protective factors, suicide risk goes up. Risk factors in terms of application to the workplace, there's a lot of research that's done in terms of risk factors according to perceived sense of being a burden. So the more the veteran feels like they're just not attaining or reaching or giving back to the level that they think they should or that they were, and now they're a burden or they're hobbled or they're not the same, the more that becomes a risk factor. Isolation is another big one, and that can take the form of relational isolation, but it can also take the form of a developmental sort of feeling with isolation, meaning internally there's a difference between who you were, who you are, and who you're going to be. And you don't like the difference, and you don't like or know where you're heading. And at a certain point in time, I can completely relate to that in my own developmental journey. And it leaves you with this sense of being lost, being off time. Now, think about the ways that work in the workplace can be an outlet for or a protective factor against those types of variables at play. Now, with that, then I want to go to a second important question. What do you do about it? What do you do about it from a suicide prevention perspective? There's three core truths that I want you to know, maybe think and talk about a little bit at a later time. Number one, the three core truths of suicide prevention for us in the VA. Suicide is preventable. We know this clinically, and we know this on the community level. Number two, suicide prevention will require all of us. We all have a role to play. It's not just me. It's not just the psychologist. It's not just mental health. That gets to number three, which is suicide prevention will require a public health approach. This is the key for you, I think, in putting these pieces together. A public health approach means that you see the impact upon the individual, you treat or address the impact upon the individual, depression, PTSD, anxiety, and you offer the best possible care for those things, including crisis services. But a true public health approach moves it beyond the individual and also sees the role of family, of community, which includes work, of regional level, of state level, of national level, and of world level. And with those contributions, looks at how to address them. So it says that the problem is not just the individual. The problem is not even the individual. The problem of suicide must be tackled at levels that include the individual in terms of treatment and prevention, but also extend beyond into the home, the community, the state, the nation, and the world as a whole. Now, how do you do that? I think there's three key words to pay attention to that are going to be relevant to you: policy, procedures, and programs within a culture. So let me conclude on this note by giving you a little test. And this test is rubber to the road. It's rubber to the road of taking the three core principles I just gave you and saying, we convert those into inclusive and sensitive sorts of approaches for veterans within the workplace. So if you want to jot these down, I'm going to give you a little test. We'll see how you do. There's two domains to this test. The first domain has to do with key considerations for supporting veteran mental health in the workplace. There's going to be a series of questions. All you have to do is answer yes or no. The second domain is how to better support inclusion for veterans' needs. Here we go. All right. Key considerations. Think about your workplace. Think about veterans. From a prevention perspective, do you have policy that supports prevention engagement for your staff? Just yes or no. Do you have programs available that enact prevention practices? Yes or no. Do you have rewards or incentives in place for prevention engagement? Do you have policy that affords confidentiality for services? Do you have a policy that incentivizes help seeking? Do you have easy to navigate HR procedures? Don't laugh, that's what I actually asked it. Do you have easy to navigate HR procedures? Do you encourage regular wellness to include mental and physical health care? Yes or no? Do you create and incentivize opportunities for employees to support one another? Do professional development plans include collaborative wellness goals and support? So one more under key considerations. Do you have a standard operating procedure in place to address workplace trauma, bereavement, or loss? So that was 10 questions, right? Now let's do 3 for the final, and this is under how to better support inclusion for veterans' needs. Are there workplace policies that may disincentivize wellness, mental health, and suicide prevention? Are there procedures in the workplace that obstruct or complicate pathways to wellness and mental health? Yes or no? And finally, do you get ahead in the workplace by negating self-care and well-being? Yes or no? Now, that's not overt, but that's more covert. So now let's take a look at that. There was 10 questions in the first group. There was 3 questions in the second group. If you answered the first 10 questions yes, and the second group of 3 questions no, then that lines up well with rubber to the road, proof is in the pudding. If you answered less than 10 yes and less than 3 no, then might be something to look at. So less than 13 points overall. But here's the last question, and there's a catch to it. Last question is this. You have asked veterans if adequate policy, procedures, and programs exist within an open culture to promote veteran whole person wellness and well-being. And you've asked if any current policy, procedures, or programs disincentivize wellness and mental health. Give yourself plus 13 if the answer to that is yes, and unfortunately minus 13 if the answer to that is no. So let's wrap this up. And let's kind of conclude it with an overall challenge. We all can struggle, and veterans sometimes have unique struggles in this with career development, workplace, job, vis-a-vis where they've been, where they are, where they're going. It's a journey, and it doesn't go by the book. Mine didn't. Within that, in looking at mental health and suicide prevention, it's important to anchor anything in 3 core principles. It's preventable. It'll take all of us. It'll take a public health approach that doesn't just look at the individual and doesn't define them as the problem, but looks at the issue and the problem across a social, ecological whole. And then you plug that in by saying, okay, do I really do it though? And to do that, you look at your policy, you look at your programs, you look at your procedures, and ultimately you ask yourself and you ask your staff and veterans, do we have policy, programs, and procedures that incentivize wellness? Do we have policies, programs, and procedures that disincentivize wellness and mental health? And that ultimately is the test of how we're doing with veteran inclusion, with veteran sensitivity, and approaches to mental health and suicide prevention in the workplace. So hopefully that gave you some good things, productive things to think, to talk about, to work on a little bit, or to ask questions about. And I'll conclude on that. And I sure do thank you for your time and for listening to me, especially around lunchtime here in the East Coast. So thanks, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Miller, for those insightful comments and sharing your experience with us. We really appreciate your comments highlighting that we all have a role to play supporting veterans in the workplace, as well as the alignment to a public health approach and both community and connectedness as important protective factors. We also appreciate how many competing demands you have and how valuable your time is. So sincerest thanks for being here with us today. You've given us a lot to think about and actually set the stage perfectly for the next portion of our event, which is a panel with some additional experts to dive a little bit deeper into key considerations for supporting veterans in the workplace and best practices for creating more inclusive and accessible workplaces as you outlined in your questions. So first, I will pass it over to my co-moderator, Ms. Jenna Flack, to introduce herself, and then we will move on to introductions for our panelists. So if everyone could share their name, organization, background, and a brief physical description, that would be great.
Awesome, thank you, Megan. So hello, everyone. My name is Jenna Flack. I am an African-American female with long Black hair. I am currently a manager serving as our Greater Washington Area Chief of Staff, where kindness and well-being is at the core of everything we do, how we do business, and our culture. I also work in IT delivery transformation at the Veterans Benefit Administration as an Agile coach. So this work is very near and dear to my heart, and I love supporting there. So I'll turn it back over to Megan to go into our panelist intros.
Great. And so first we'll pass it over to Dr. Dan Pelton.
Right. Thanks, Megan. Good morning. My name is Dan Pelton. I'm a specialist leader at Deloitte, work in our government and public services practice. I'm a Caucasian male wearing a blue and white shirt, a gray sports coat, and I'm in my home office in Denver, Colorado, so still very much morning for us out here. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. Like Dr. Miller, served in the military. I was in the Army. Was an Army psychologist at a variety of hospitals around the country, and actually have a story similar to Dr. Miller about sort of the last pick, sort of going there, which was Fort Polk, Louisiana, which actually turned out to be great for me. I did deploy to Afghanistan after that with the infantry and served as the mental health provider for around 4,000 soldiers. I was with Deloitte for about 9 years and work in standing up our Deloitte wellness and mental health market capability, where we do a lot of work around mental health, to Dr. Miller's point, around prevention, policies, programs, and procedures. So really grateful to be here and look forward to the conversation today.
Wonderful. And then we'll pass it over to Dr. Ainspan.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Nathan Ainspan. I'm the Senior Research Psychologist with the Military Civilian Transition Office at the Department of Defense, and we love our acronym, so it's known as DoD MCTO, and it gets even better. That's a program that handles two of the programs for the military, the Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program, YIRP, and the Transition Assistance Program, or the TAP. The TAP program is the program that helps and trains the service members when they leave the military from active duty to become civilians. And the Yellow Ribbon Program is the one that does the same for reservists as they go back and forth between their civilian lives. The intent of the combined programs in my office is to make sure that when the members take off the uniform, either full-time when they leave active duty or as part of their reservist duties, that they have successful, full, psychologically healthy lives as they transition and reintegrate successfully into their communities. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist by training and by background, with an interest in how employment can help in a successful and in the mental health transition needs of our members. Over.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Mr. Delap, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Greg Delap, Caucasian male, age 67. I think I'm the oldest so far on the screen. Near 100% gray hair. There's a little holdout there still left. I'm home in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania, which is outside of Reading, Pennsylvania, about 60 miles due west of Philadelphia. Wearing blue shirt pattern. I'm wearing a classic COVID era outfit with a dress shirt with gym shorts and socks, but you don't see all the rest of that. Been in the employee assistance and HR world for 44 years and just retired 7 weeks ago as CEO of the Employee Assistance Professionals Association. Have worked with many, many, many veterans over the years. I am not a veteran myself, draft eligible at the tail end of Vietnam. High number was not called. Every relative in the generation ahead of me, every male relative served, and 6 of the 9 female relatives ahead of me in the generation served in some capacity. Thank you for having me today.
Okay, great. And Dr. Ainspan, anything to add? I know you were.
Oh, and I forgot to describe myself. Apologies for that. I'm a white male, middle-aged with light brown hair, what's left of it, in my home office in Arlington, Virginia, outside DC. Behind me is an overly crowded collection of books and artifacts. Over.
Wonderful. Well, we are very excited for all the collective expertise that we have on the webinar here today. So we'll go ahead and dive into our panel questions. So we wanted to kick it off with a question for all of our panelists. So we'll just go around the group and everyone will have a chance to respond. But if you could please explain what mental wellness means to you, and also perhaps give an example of a simple low-cost activity that you could do each day to help improve mental wellness or resilience. So Dr. Pelton, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Megan. It's a good question. And you read a lot about mental wellness nowadays. And the challenge is there are so many different ways to define it. And I'm sure the other panelists may look at it, in the same way or a little bit different. The simplest way I like to think about mental wellness is thinking of the mental health spectrum, from mental wellness on one hand and mental illness on the other. So in other words, in sort of how I fashion it, mental wellness is a positive state of mental health. What does that actually look like, though? So we think about emotions, positive emotions like happiness, joy, pride, satisfaction. Think about healthy relationships as a key to mental wellness. Another thing you'll read a lot about now is optimism. And actually, that's a term that's been around a lot and is a key feature of resilience, which I can talk to in just a minute. Another key feature of mental wellness, another thing we read about is meaning and purpose. That's a big thing, especially through COVID, is people trying to sort of identify what is the purpose and meaning behind the work that I do. And for leaders to be able to help people understand what that is a challenge, but is really important. So that's how I view mental wellness. But the second part, Megan, is what are some activities that we can do to sort of curate wellness or even resilience? And so I'll say that I just want to talk about 2 terms quickly, and that's resilience and burnout. And the reason is again, open your computer, look online, and there will be tons of things about resilience and burnout. And it's a big thing with the military, especially. I deployed, it was 10 years ago. And we were just sort of in the beginning of talking about how do you sort of curate a resilient force. So it's not a new term, but when we think about resilience, I like to think about it that in two ways. So the ability, number one, the ability to bounce back from adversity. And then two, taking that adversity to catalyze personal growth. And the key word that gets lost a lot in resilience is adversity, like having to go through adversity and using that to sort of spur some sort of growth. And burnout, which is some would say is the other side of that coin, is probably something we can all identify with. Work-related stress that leads to exhaustion, detachment, sense of futility. So the question is, how do we, to your point, Megan, like what can we do to curate wellness? So I like to think of there's a term called mental agility, and that's how to sort of bridge that gap between resilience and burnout. And it's using our emotions in a mindful, values-driven, productive way. Essentially a way to develop resilience while navigating burnout. In its real core sense, it's doing something different with your emotions. So how do we become mental agile? And I'll end on this. And these are not only low cost, these are free activities that you can do. I do want to caveat though, Dr. Miller mentioned all the institutional things that can be done. Absolutely. And we'll probably get into that. I'll just cover like 3 personal things all of us can do throughout the day to sort of strengthen our mental agility muscle. From an emotional perspective, I like to think about emotional literacy. If I got a doctorate in psychology, and if there were 2 words I could say that sort of sums that up, it's becoming emotionally literate. And I didn't realize that was an issue until, I was in the field working with a lot of soldiers whose primary issue was anger, rightly so. What was interesting is over time, as we could help sort of expand the vocabulary around their emotional state, there was like sadness or hopelessness or guilt or fear. Suddenly the aperture opened. And what was interesting is they were able to name those emotional states. They started to feel more calm and were able to solve problems even more adeptly. So when I think of how do we curate mental wellness? That's one piece, is strengthening our emotional literacy muscle. From a mental perspective, and I will not go into too much detail, but I'll just say the practice of mindfulness is such an important thing to do. A misnomer around mindfulness is that it's meant to cause you to feel relaxed. That's great if that happens, but the real purpose is to stay focused on the present moment. Because when we're present, like now, if we're present, we're more attentive, we're more productive, we're more engaged, actually have better relationships when we're present. So from a mental perspective, again, a free activity, mindfulness is such an important thing to do. And behaviorally, and this, I don't mean this to sound flippant, but taking control of the things you can control and yielding the things you can't is such a powerful exercise to do, again, to sort of create that mental agility. And you can do that by, making a list of things today I can control and things I can't control. So again, I'll just caveat, those are personal things we all can do to strengthen our mental wellness muscle, again, that positive state of mental health. Again, there are institutional things that we can do as well. And I think Dr. Miller covered them brilliantly, but if we have time, we can cover those as well. So Megan, back over to you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Dan, for those comments. Dr. Ainspan, Greg, either of you want to hop in on sort of what mental wellness means to you and strategies for enhancing that?
I think the description just given is excellent. So I'll skip the description and just go to, what can you do? What you can do is be outside rather than inside. Take advantage of nature, whatever form it comes in. Be near, around, or somehow involved with water. Be involved with life, whatever form it comes in. Interact with people, communicate. Find reasons to infuse humor, because it's a funny place out there if you really don't take it too seriously. Remember that people remember the exception. So in some small way daily, try to be the exception. Doesn't mean you have to be an exceptional person It just that people remember the exception, the humor, the kind gesture, the question asked, the offer of assistance. You know, that's how you get through each day. Small pieces strung together, end of the day, pretty satisfying.
I love that. I think that echoes a lot of what Dr. Miller was saying around community too. So yeah, thank you for sharing those. Dr. Ainspan, anything from you?
Sure. I would definitely echo and reiterate the other comments that came out, and particularly that mental wellness is not the absence of mental illness. There's a movement in the literature of positive psychology, which was begun by Dr. Seligman and others, that realize, it's not just curing PTSD or addressing deficiencies or problems, but really, self-actualizing, ideally in the end, that the individuals can really fully engage in the world and be the best that they can be, particularly for tools that will accomplish that. If you look at service members and veterans, it's having a sense of purpose, of being part of something bigger than themselves. The people join the military and we have the all-volunteer force. The biggest reason is because they want to do something big, to defend the country, to get out of their own heads and be part of something bigger and have an impact beyond their own lives. And we see that that's not something they can turn off when they become veterans. So really, the number one thing I recommend for mental wellness for the military population when they leave is to find something to engage in that will deliver that same kind of effect. It can be a house of worship. It can be volunteering with a veteran service organization. As an industrial psychologist, for me, I would love it. It would be employment, that your job will give you that same sense of mission and purpose as the military did. But find something, because if you don't have that, I can almost guarantee it'll be a difficult transition and potentially difficult life.
Dr. Ansman, that's a great segue into our next question. I feel like you're already hitting on it a little bit, but we wanted to ask you specifically, why is veteran mental health in the workplace important, and what are some of the specific considerations around that transition back into civilian employment?
I mean, mental health is critical, as we were saying, for anybody in the workforce, but then especially for the veterans who have come from such a mission and directed sense of purpose, and having that kind of life. To not have that kind of purpose will lead to many mental health issues. There was a study of members with PTSD where some received medication and others were able to get a job, and they found that the symptom reduction lines were virtually identical, that getting a job was just as effective as medication for people with PTSD, with one exception. Over time, the medication wore off and symptoms reemerged. People who were employed were able to more or less keep the symptoms at bay and keep the improvement going over time. So I think being able to have that purpose, being able to look forward to do something, if there are issues, there's a literature on the psychosocial benefits of employment, that having a job can lead to actual symptom reduction. The VA and others have many programs that even for veterans with very severe symptoms, both physical and mental, they will have sheltered workplaces that will allow them to engage in the workforce and build up into a more engaged environment over time. And we can see that if someone has anger issues, being able to interact with other people and being able to reiterate that they were able to succeed in that day and they didn't kill anybody that day is very reinforcing and will benefit over time.
That's great, and very impressive research too that you highlighted on sort of that effect of employment. And just wanted to open it up to Dan or Greg if you have other comments, but anything else around sort of the intersection of disability and veteran mental health?
A couple of things to keep in mind about the workplace. It's not static. HR VPs, HR managers change over every 3 to 5 years. There's sometimes total staff changeovers in 3 to 5 years. I had the good fortune to work at a specialty steel manufacturer for nearly 34 years in HR and employee assistance. The one consistent change was in people. People coming in, hired, leaving, retiring. So that, you wonder, at what point do we get it finally as an employer? Well, we need to be really vigilant over and over again on these same themes and these same issues, because people change in the mix of the operation. And so there's a relearning process that goes on constantly. And that really hits to me to some of the comments from Dr. Miller about what policies and procedures are in place to support, which ones are hindrances. Because the policy and procedures needs to survive the changeover in people. Points out to me where a lot of the focus ought to be on the policy and procedure end of it. And that begs on, the whole role of consultation, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit in both the HR and the employee assistance side. But it's constant change in people, not just product, service, work environment. And as a result, we've got a relearning process that's going on all the time.
Yeah, and Megan, I don't know if I have much to add. I would, I think a big question is, do we have a culture that supports wellness and mental health at large? Like, is our culture supporting that? And I think to answer that question, again, I'll go back to Dr. Miller. What are the policies, programs, prevention activities? If those aren't there or in place, it may be that we don't have a culture in place necessarily that's totally supportive. Or do we have he also had mentioned, and I've thought a lot about this, do we have a reward system or a performance management system that reinforces burnout? Or that, maybe it's focused on not as much on impact, but as much as sort of production. And that's fine for some organizations, but not for others. So I think taking a sort of an institutional lens and doing a deep dive into those three areas, I think, Megan, is sort of a critical first step to answer that question around how do we create a culture that's supportive of mental health.
Yeah,
that's
great.
fantastic. And with that same thread, we were wondering if you had or could highlight any leading practices or success stories where you've seen these policies and practices come to life and really thrive that made veteran mental health better in the workplace. Any examples? We'd love to hear them.
So I'm happy to jump in. I've been at Deloitte for 9 years, so that's sort of how I view things. But we also work with a lot of organizations around wellness, mental health, certainly with veterans. So the question is like, what can we do in our environment, I think, to create a more inclusive environment for veterans and for all people. Again, I'll sort of foot stomp the first thing around inventory our programs. That's kind of like table stakes. And then sort of practical things that we can do that I've seen sort of, I'll say, contribute to cultural wellness. And this is a super simple thing, but from a manager perspective, simply encouraging and reinforcing the value of taking breaks. I know that may sound a little trite, but our small actions like that can really change the corporate culture. So normalizing, even during the workday, sort of, taking midday breaks and to run errands, even to do things like that. As a leader, if I give people permission, veterans and otherwise, it's really interesting the impact on culture that can have. Another sort of thing that I know Deloitte does, and actually a lot of companies do, are really to give back that wellness to the organization is, and again, very simple, is a meeting-free day. So Deloitte had one on Friday. And what we do basically, and again, it's not just us, other companies, and it's an act to change the culture and evolve it towards a more of a wellness culture. And so there's no internal meetings on a particular day, maybe several times out of the year. And what's interesting is what happens is I want to meet with someone, but suddenly that goes to Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, or maybe it just doesn't happen anymore. And we find that we give people time back in the day to work on a Friday, like to get their work done. Typically work may start after 4 p.m. after all these meetings, but it's sort of a very simple act like that we've found in this new hybrid world has helped move the culture to more sort of, inclusive and allowing that opportunity for people really just to sort of have a wellness break. And I say this not just for veterans, this is something we do, for everyone. And we found that, and there's a bunch more things, and I won't sort of belabor those, that we could do, but have found it to be so impactful for the well-being, the cultural well-being of people at Deloitte.
I think one of the things you run across in employee assistance with regularity is employee assistance isn't just about counseling. If you get away from any particular label like that, counseling is what employee assistance is, it really comes down to two things. The role of employee assistance is provide options to the organization and how to work with employees, and options to the employee and how to work with his or her issues. That's number one. Number two is those options need to affect solutions, and the solutions are in the context of the workplace. An individual solution outside the workplace still doesn't help that person in the workplace. So you got options and solutions, and one way to affect a positive implementation of that is to use peers. And so one of the things I've seen very successful in different workplaces, often orchestrated through employee assistance, is to match people with other folks who've gone through what they've gone through, who work in a similar type of work that they work in, who might have similar backgrounds. And these peer groups become quite supportive as everyone collectively works with the organization. I found in my time that the veterans, especially combat veterans, did well matching up with others in the workplace who had a similar experience. And we can all expound on the reasons why that's a positive thing, but it's such a small thing that can be orchestrated quite easily by just matching people up, obviously with the permission of all involved, and provide support within the context of work because of the uniqueness of what these folks all have in common in background. Very simple, but it works quite effectively.
I mean, at a simplest level, just having a manager ask the subordinate employees how they're doing, being aware of any major things in their personal life, if there's an illness in the family. In the military, this is a very common thing, that as a commander, you will know about any at-home issues from any of your subordinates. And if they have a sick pet, if they're getting into fights with their spouse, as a commander, that's your problem, and you'll work to resolve that. That's a bit extreme for the civilian organization, but just as a boss checking in with you, are you doing okay? I understand your parent was sick. How's that coming along? Would you need the time for that? One organization actually has a survey where they give their pulse that week of how stressed out they are, because they've seen research that it's okay to be stressed when you're under a deadline, under pressure, et cetera. But if that continues week after week after month, it's kind of like your heart rate. It's good to have it pounding while you're working out, but you've got to calm down. And if they see someone, and they'll aggregate by supervisor, if they find that one supervisor seems to be running a team extra hard, they'll engage with that supervisor, and they'll see that individuals aren't constantly running at a high tempo for no reason whatsoever. And especially in terms of bringing mental health and compassion and understanding to the veterans, certainly understanding that they are used to supervisors who would engage with them personally, encourage managers in a civilian environment to talk to them, to inquire what's going on. And that extends to the family as well. One program that's been used by large companies that have big customer service functions would be to have a team of dedicated military family specialists who work the helpline, who understand the lingo, et cetera, and to alert other employees that if someone's calling about a bill, their cable bill might be a little late because of PCS, to recognize that that's a military term and to transfer it to a team of specialists. PCS is permanent change of station, which means they're being relocated. and to empower the people on that team to work with the military spouse in this case to provide additional time or additional leeway to help that military family going through a rough time. This is also a really effective tool on the recruiting side for that company, because when that service member leaves the military and the spouse remembers how this company treated them when they're having a difficult time during the PCS, you can't buy recruiting material like that. That will be forefront in the mind and will be of interest to apply to that company. But really, I repeat what everyone else is saying, it's really just go outside, provide the resources, provide the downtime to let people, take a meditation break, to get outside and just to be aware in a real way of what everyone's going through and what they may need, and to make it available.
Great, yeah, and I think another comment, just building upon some of the highlights we all provided around options and solutions within the workplace, I think it's important to note that there's a very large portion of the veteran community, veteran population that doesn't leverage VA services or benefits. So workplaces really are that key touch point, which I believe Jackie alluded to in her comments earlier. So want to pose another question, and apologies, there's a fire truck in the background. Wanted to pose another question around, understanding that everyone's needs are different. How might the work environment and work practices be made more inclusive with regard to employee wellness needs? And are there any veteran or military specific considerations here? So understanding that there's variability within this population as well.
In terms of veteran needs and generalizability, the story is when you've met one veteran, you've met one veteran. They do each have unique needs, but they're a sample of the population. Really, if you provide to the individual needs for what they do need, you'll be assisting the veterans as well as everybody else. A lot of companies are merging the veteran initiatives they have as part of the diversity and inclusion work that they're doing, which is an effective tool because frequently veterans have been the canaries in the mine of reacting to something that will then impact the rest of the population. I think having the resources available, having the cafeteria approach to resources where you can pick and choose amongst the things that are being offered. If you don't have kids, daycare will be less of an issue, but maybe elder care would be important, and making as many things available to as many, and recognizing the different needs of the different groups and the different cultural issues that could emerge. Again, vets are less likely to ask for help than others, but then other populations and minority groups will have their needs as well. So it's really taking the full diversity approach to the point of to not just diversity, but welcoming inclusion as well. That extends also to disabilities as well, to the companies that are more open and understanding. Similar for people with disabilities have also been canaries that they've pushed out. When their needs have been met, the needs of others will also soon be met as well.
It's interesting, Megan, if this conversation took place in 2019, we'd have a different flavor to the exchange. As we all know, in the last 20 plus months, there's never been this much attention paid to mental health in general and mental health in the workplace specifically. And because of that, in reality, if you talk to those in the HR circles and they start getting honest about what they've been doing for 20 months, what they've been doing for 20 months is finding ways to accommodate employees in ways that have never been done before on this scale. So in the context of what could or should be available to individuals with disabilities, those who are veterans and have particular issues related to that history, or really any one of us, all that's been going on in the HR world for 20 months is finding ways to accommodate employee needs to get the work done. So what a great time to accelerate the push for different programs and services. In this case today, unique to veterans and those with disabilities, because the environment's really ripe for that. because every employer out there has had to find ways in the last 20 months to accommodate the needs of their employees in ways they never anticipated they'd have to consider in the past. And now they are. So I think, personally, I think the door is much wider open today than 2019 for a discussion on this subject or anything related to it about how to infuse into the workplace policies and procedures, programs and services that make sense and accommodate the needs of the folks who are working there. I think this is a great time for that.
That's awesome. And one thing too, that Greg, as you were talking, reminded me of, I saw a survey that came out that was looking at, a host of organizations, and nearly all of them implemented cost savings measures over the last year. But amongst that sample, half had increased their well-being budgets, even though they were making those cost savings adjustments in other places. I think that's an impactful statement. But Dan, over to you for any other comments on that question.
Oh, I was just going to build on what Greg had said. What we're seeing now in terms of, so I totally agree. The culture has shifted towards inclusion and sort of understanding and even empathy. What we're seeing companies struggle with now is, and maybe all of us on the call, hey, we're going to more of a hybrid setting, where some people may be in the office, some people may be at home for whatever reason. There could be a host of reasons. How do we create inclusion? How do we make that an inclusive environment when there's some people here and there's some people there? And that's I think, going to be a challenge for a lot of organizations. What we've recommended and worked with some folks around is what we call hybrid norms. Like, what are the actual hybrid work norms? And if there's a Zoom meeting, let's say, or Teams or whatever meeting, in person, and there's 8 people there and there's 4 people at home, again, for whatever reason, how do we help them feel included? And we recommend like super simple things. Everyone in the office have their computer on, and not talk to their peer to their left or to their right. So we're really simulating that virtual setting, so that people at home feel, like they're part of the team. Even having a virtual whiteboard, that may sound silly, like you're all in a conference room, but again, if we're trying to create a culture of inclusion when there's no, we don't want, for whatever reason, people may not be there, that kind of thing will simulate that feeling and that notion that we're all one team, and so there's a lot of things that we can do around that. And Greg, as I look towards the future of the next year, that's something I think we'll struggle with. And we need to be proactive about how can we create inclusion when there are people all over the place.
Great points and very relevant, because I'm in New Jersey right now and most of my team is in DC, so I can totally relate. Greg, question for you in regards to EAP. Do EAP programs tailor offerings to the VMA community, and if so, how?
So a roundabout answer to your question. The real answer is it depends. When I started in employee assistance way long ago, most programs were internal to one company and focused on drug and alcohol, and often were staffed by people who came through their own recovery. In fact, a subset of that are people who were fired by the company because of their use, rehired later because of their recovery. An interesting dynamic way back when. So when I entered into the field, non-recovery, no story to tell, even though every family tree's got a story in there somewhere. A master's degree in young, and like no one knew what to do with me. In fact, I was viewed with some suspect. Today, overwhelmingly, employee assistance programs are offered external to the organization, highly degreed professionals, primarily social work. About 60% of EAPs are social work trained. Different vantage point and strong clinical skills, not necessarily strong organizational skills. And it's created some interesting dynamics. So given that whole spectrum I've just described, it depends on the employer, what vantage point they're going to take. On the whole, employee assistance professionals are well-versed in handling illness and injury and the disabilities that are related to illness and injury. excuse me, many, not all, are well-versed in working with the veteran communities. Where that falls apart a little bit is the exposure and experience in working with veterans may not be there in the context of the organization. And so there's some bridge building that has to go on there. But if you were to take an average, just pluck out of the crowd an employee assistance professional, on the whole, they're going to be able to pull this off quite well. The one area that is a trap, really, for my peers, and I've seen it played out innumerable times, many, many times, is to try to assume to know and understand the lived experience that veteran has. I make it very clear when I talk with folks who are veterans. Although I've been around it my entire life, I come from a long history of family history of veterans. By choice, as it turns out, virtually all my best friends are veterans, but I never pretend to fully understand that lived experience because it's not mine. And I take an approach that's very common in manufacturing, the world I worked in most of the time. Some are familiar with the lean quality standards, lean quality manufacturing. One of the basic premises of lean is you go to the lowest level possible, the person working on the floor with that machine. Old vernacular, if you allow me, man machine, to understand the nature of the work. Well, the same applies here. I don't pretend to know what a veteran thinks and feels. I can describe it, I don't live it. I need to get that person involved with someone who does. And so it's a constant search on the part of employee assistants to find those resources internal to the company, internal to that community, or external, wherever I need to go to find it, to make sure that when I work with a veteran in employee assistance, I've got the tools and resources available to match what they need, not just what I had to offer.
That's fantastic. Are there any specific community-based organizations that you typically refer veterans and their families to? And what do those relationships look like in terms of qualifications and requirements to align with them?
Is that directed to me, Jenna?
Yes.
Okay. The company I worked for operated in 11 states and 6 different countries, non-US. So every community is going to be different. Some are well-versed with resources related to veterans, some are hardly exist. I used to go where I needed to go to get that. What was always very helpful, is in no matter what organization, whether it's a community-based service, whether it's a counseling agency, whether it's an activity-based program in the community, I always asked, who on staff do you have who is a veteran? And it seems like such a simple question, but no matter what the nature of the service, if within that box there is someone or several someones who are veterans, I now have an additional veteran service, no matter what the nature of that agency or service is. I now know there's a subset that I can go to directly and match more appropriately to an employee and his or her needs if I know there's a veteran who works there. So it's a roundabout question, answer, Jenna, but it's you can run the laundry list of the normal services that are out there. And in Eastern Pennsylvania, we're very fortunate with VA facilities in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, and Philadelphia area, and a lot of service available there. But again, as recently as yesterday, I was talking with a group that's in the AIDS prevention and AIDS service in a community near Reading, Pennsylvania. And after we got through the AIDS-related questions, the very next question I had was, by the way, do you have anyone on staff who is a veteran? If they do, they've already moved up on the list. Kind of a homespun approach, Jenna.
That's wonderful. And I think certainly appreciate getting the perspective and having someone on staff who has that lived experience. And curious again, Greg, for you, so in instances where perhaps they don't have someone on staff who has that lived experience, are there specific procedures or trainings to enhance sort of that cultural competency for EAP providers in that instance? And if so, like sort of what are the best practices around that?
Many of our members in the EAP Association work for veterans-related groups. Many work for the service branches right now with active duty. And so there's a lot to be learned peer-to-peer. And part of the role of the association that people belong to in employee assistance is to ferret out from the crowd who's doing good work and to make sure their work is put out there for others to see and learn from. Many of our members work for Military One. Many work for the branches themselves. Many work for veterans organizations. So if you want to improve their perspectives and eventually get to the skill base as it relates to working with veterans, we would rely on those who are already doing that work within our association, who found a way to bridge their knowledge and experience with employee assistance and application in veterans communities. So again, it's kind of more of a low-key approach to getting that exposure for the rest of us. In addition to going to those who are decided experts, such as the people on the screen.
And I would add, in terms of resources available for a clinician, a therapist, or a provider who may not have the military background but wants to work with this population, Psych Armor is a nonprofit organization that provides training. And then there's the Center for Deployment Psychology, here's the acronym CDP, was started by both the American Psychological Association and the Department of Defense explicitly to provide training about the military, about veterans issues for providers. And both of them offer free web-based, also in-person courses. Frequently, they'll provide continuing education credits for people who have to maintain licenses. And they're explicitly geared to help these providers come up to speed to better understand the military and veterans issues. And they have everything from like a 30-minute course or a one-page document to a week-long class that you can take to really go deep. So I encourage anyone at EAP or anyone wanting to learn about this culture, to use these resources. That's what they're there for.
Thank you for that. I will pass that on.
That's great. And Dan, any other comments on sort of resources or training from your work as well?
First of all, CDP, I agree. It was great. That's actually when I left the military, I worked there for a year. So that's a great resource. I'm trying to think, Megan, adding on to what they had said, there's some things at Deloitte that we do around sort of, veteran transition services. If we have time, I can talk in more detail about those, Megan.
Yeah, I think that's great. We can transition to that right now. Actually, if we want to kick it over to some of the ways that you support transition, that would be perfect timing.
Sure. Yeah. So, at Deloitte, we've got a strong community of veteran and military affiliated groups, and that includes veterans, spouses, caregivers, advocates. Our community at Deloitte is around 1,000 strong and growing annually. So we really focus our efforts on, hiring veterans and military spouses. That's a priority for us in our firm. Encouraging continued service in reserves and National Guard. And there's, in terms of policies, there are things that we have in place to allow those type of things. Excuse me. And then providing coaching support and mentorship to veterans inside Deloitte and outside Deloitte. We've supported the VMA community and continue to in many ways. It would take me a long time to describe them all. I just want to talk about two programs that may be of interest to folks. There's one that we have called Career Opportunity Redefinition Exploration, CORE. So of course we have to have an acronym, so everyone knows it as our CORE program. And it's meant to help transitioning veterans do a couple of things. And the first is to simply gain deeper insight into their interests, how their military experiences align to career goals. And Dr. Ainspan, I believe in one of your comments said, meaning and mission and purpose for military is such a key piece. And part of this program's help align that to kind of the mission in our workforce. And then the second piece is not only sort of having the language to make that transition, but to really build skills for a successful transition. We have, I said again, core program. We have two programs. One is pre-hire veterans and then post-hire veterans. We facilitate these programs, and it's really around leadership experience, strengths, and how, again, interests align to a post-military career. So really cool stuff. We've had 727 veterans go through the core program. Really good. We do surveys and have a really good outcomes in terms of how the skills apply to the job. We have around 500 Deloitte volunteers who support these programs. And we actually work with clients. We've had 30 or more work on a corporate panel, and the panel speaks to the core leadership program. So that's been a targeted, specific initiative that our firm has really invested a lot into. And then a second one is our military spouse initiative. And what's interesting is this is a program created by military spouses for military spouses. So the people who have that lived experience help create that program. And what it does is we try and attract and retain military spouses through the program. What's interesting is we'll see there's a lot of active pursuits even out there around military family experience that Deloitte, is leading some of those engagements. The MSI, as it's called, Military Spouse Initiative, helps support those things. And then the program also offers professional development and mentoring to military spouses who are external to Deloitte. So really, really cool. Those are two initiatives that we do. There are a variety of other activities that go on, but these are just a couple that I thought were important to highlight.
And if I can add, we're looking at the active duty transitioning to full-time employment. One program that I've heard Deloitte does, as well as other companies, and the population they have to address as well, is the reservists and guardsmen. Because in the past 20 years, guardsmen and reservists have been activated and put into active duty at high rates like we haven't seen in our nation's past. In addition to their Guard and Reserve being used for COVID response and for some of the events in the past few years, we're seeing the members getting activated and deployed far beyond the 1 weekend a month, 2 weekends a year, or 2 weeks a year approach, that they're being called up for 90 days, 180 days or more. And one thing a lot of successful companies have done is when you have a guardsman or a reservist tell their boss that they're activated, the 3 words, we've got your back. Every company is required to do a minimum to maintain the employment for that person while they're called up, to not fire them. A lot of good progressive companies have realized they do more. They will continue the insurance to the family as if they aren't activated. They will hold the position. They will keep them in the loop. They will help maybe with a bridge loan if they're losing income. Many companies will continue, even though they don't have to, the pay that person would get if they weren't activated. And we're finding that helps the nation as well, because this helps the members continue on in their Guard and Reserve duties, and they won't quit because it minimizes the interruption that would have with their personal lives. So we're seeing many companies step up to the plate and putting their money where their mouth is and supporting our members when they get called up to do their duties. And that may not seem big, but it has a huge effect back at DoD when we have guardsmen who continue to volunteer to serve in these capacities.
Wonderful. So I think just wanting to go back really quickly to something we heard from Dr. Miller a bit earlier. I know he gave us a great list of questions for all of us to sort of go back and think about after this webinar, in particular around some of the considerations for our respective organizations' policies, procedures, and programs. Wondering if the experts on the line now have any sort of actionable recommendations for listeners on this topic and sort of how you can support your respective organizations in reviewing these different items.
That was a fascinating list of 13 questions. I didn't write fast enough, so I'm hoping to get this in another format later. One thing I do want to point out, most employers are not of the size of Deloitte and may not have the resources of Deloitte. Fortunate for you folks that you do. And even though the company I worked for was a $2.2 billion steel company, you know, total population was around 5,000 employees, really spread out. So that just about everything was handled as a one-off because you didn't have a critical mass of 700 plus folks involved who have a similar background of, you know, veteran. So these questions have been quite helpful. I would say, as far as I was trying to answer these and writing at the same time, I would say, hopefully none of my peers from where I used to work are on the screen here, we failed on the 13 questions, but what a great place to start. And something that's not been mentioned here, a resource that's out there are other associations like SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, peers in the HR world facing all similar circumstances, but having 1 and 2 or 3 or 5 in their work group, not 700. The approach through the peers in the HR world and employee assistance world to get at these 13 questions would be a great way to go. The circulation in those 13 questions would be quite helpful.
And I would say, as you go through the questions, don't be afraid to really dig in and look at your culture. As you said, admit, we are not answering these questions properly. From a corporate perspective, get the senior leader buy-in. What gets noticed at that level will get measured. What gets measured gets changed. And also, as you talk to senior leadership, use business terms about it. When you talk about these mental health initiatives, there is a return on investment for the time and the money that are spent on these things. The calculation from places like SHRM is replacing one employee can equal 50 to up to 200% of that employee's salary due to the time productivity loss coming up to speed. So if you have employees that are burning out, who aren't doing well, who see better opportunities, a better culture, a better environment at another company, that will cost the company at the bottom line, in addition to any of the insights, impact that employee would have. So any money spent, at my previous example, supporting your reservists, if that keeps that employee active and engaged, and when the headhunter comes, if they hang up the phone, that's money well spent. And this has such a force multiplying effect to have a healthy, wellness-oriented organization of employers that do care. And the big thing is, make sure you walk the talk. Many companies will talk about doing this, about mental health, about caring for its employees, but will they actually have managers go up and say, are you feeling overloaded? And even more rare, will they actually move work around if the answer is yes? We see members of the military community and veterans had to develop very sensitive BS detectors in order to survive in the military. And besides their mission orientation, that's something that doesn't go away either. So particularly for veterans, and again, as the canaries in the mine, make sure you're living up to what you're stating and your values and what your webpage says, because they will know and they'll vote with their feet. And then coincidentally, other employees will react the same way. So really make sure it's not just a mantra, but it's something that's being done. Did your senior leader take time off for paternity leave when they had a child? That speaks more than any full color brochure that might be out there. And then really respect the individuals and offer them the resources But remember that in the end, it's a business decision, but it's a very practical business decision to engage your employees and keep them, that mental health wellness will pay off at the end.
Yeah, and I would just say there's like kind of two ends to this. There's the sort of outcomes end, what we're seeing in the workforce, and then there's the other side of the strategy. Like, is the strategy in place? What does the data say? So we'll hear from organizations that say our employees are burned out. Like, we're hearing that, we're like, it's very clear. And then we'll say, how do you know that? And we do, a lot of times they haven't actually surveyed the group. It's just sort of a sentiment. So it's really important to get a sense of the sentiment, and if we can at all quantify that, whether it's through attrition, whether it's through a variety of different things, to sort of gauge the sentiment of the organization. That's kind of on the data end. And on the strategy end, is well-being. We often look at sort of their strategic objectives. Is there a people strategy part of your business? And most companies have a people part of it. And is well-being part of that strategy? And sometimes it's not, and it's simply as, hey, let's make these adjustments. And sometimes that's a little bit of a litmus test towards the culture of the organization. Is that something that we want to value and really put as a core objective? And it's not simply flipping a switch and making that happen. There's a lot that would go into that. So I think it's important to look at that end, the front end, the strategy, the policy, the procedures, programs, and then also looking at some of the data. And are we actually, accurately capturing the sentiment in the organization? And what are we doing based on that as well? So Megan, there's certainly a lot, and I know we've kind of hit that point many times, but I think it's important to reinforce that. Is there an infrastructure in place to support this for the organization?
If I could, Megan, just to add a little bit to that, and it's more homespun. I've been accused before of being.
Up, you went on mute, Greg.
There's a cliffhanger.
There we go.
All that good stuff I just said.
We missed all the good stuff.
So I'll just mention that I've been accused of being kind of pathologically rational with some of this stuff. And so it's always comes across kind of homespun. But if you talk to HR folks right now, what are they struggling with? Talent acquisition, talent retention, resilience, engagement, presenteeism, flexibility. The list could go on. Who has lived experience that can help guide by way of their experience? Folks who have disabilities and those who are veterans, who've demonstrated repeatedly resilience, engagement, flexibility, presenteeism, et cetera, et cetera. I've talked to so many colleagues, EAP and HR colleagues, and they're looking for, understandably looking for these highly sophisticated, well-researched, well-documented responses. And the part that's missing over and over again is talk to your employees who are disabled, who are veterans. Ask them the questions, the 13 questions we just heard. They'll tell you which policies and procedures aren't working, aren't helping those that are. They'll also tell you where the resilience needs to be shored up, where the presenteeism can be better attended to, and where the communication might be falling short or where it's coming through just fine. We just need to do more of it. If anything I can contribute in this discussion here, it's talk to the employees who are already been there. Take from that guidance to answer those 13 questions.
No, I think that's super powerful to take that retrospective look and have the feedback loops for continuous improvement. I know we covered a lot today. At peak, we had almost 430 or more on this call. So as we're coming to a close, we wanted to go around and hear from each of you to tell us if there's one key takeaway you'd like for today's attendees to walk away with, or people who will watch this later, because we will be sharing and hosting this recording publicly. We'd love to hear that from each of you. So Dan, if you'd like to go first with just one closing thought, key takeaway.
Sure. Yeah. And I don't know if this has been mentioned explicitly, but there's, and maybe it has been sort of in the ether, but it's how to express empathy and compassion for veterans and for other groups as well. And I often reference Brene Brown, who's a prolific author, and she has one of the best descriptions of empathy. And she says it's communicating the incredibly healing message that you're not alone. And every time I think of that, say that, it almost makes me, a little misty. Because I think, do we do that? In every interaction that we have with people, veterans, I'd say even especially, do we have that? Do we give that sense that you're not alone? I've talked to people who feel alone, who feel very alone. They feel lost in the system. They feel disconnected and disengaged. So I like that definition. And I even write that down on a note card and try and even recommend to have that sort of in your mind. Do we feel connected, even though we're all on computers? Can I sort of communicate that message to a veteran? You're not alone. We're in this together. Here's how I can help or be helpful for you. So Jen, I think, again, I don't know if it feels like that's sort of the underlying the conversation today, but that would be something I would encourage. If we all can sort of think after conversations, has that been communicated? Maybe not explicitly, but has that sentiment come across? Because I think if we can do that, that can really sort of shift the narrative and shift our culture in an inclusive way that I think we would all want to have.
Picking up on that message that you're not alone, that you have options. Those options can affect solutions, and you're going to be part of that solution. It's not going to be imposed on you. It's going to be generated through you with us. It's a more collaborative approach. It's not a policy and procedure approach. And it goes to the source to find out what's needed and what's working and what's not. Very simple feedback.
And definitely echoing that, a lot of the veterans do come out, and as a minority population, only less than 5% have served. They really do feel like we've had members say, I'd rather be back fighting in Afghanistan than on the main street or in an office building in my hometown, that they do feel that they're not part of this community, not part of this nation, and letting them know that they are American citizens, first and foremost. Specifically for the intersectionality of disability and veteran status, we're seeing research. RAND just came out with a study of civilian perceptions, and we are seeing support for veterans, but we're still seeing the wounded warrior image, and that try to disabuse people of that impression. They see 20 to 30% of veterans have PTSD. In the civilian world, about 20 to 25% of people have PTSD at one time or another. This isn't a bunch of injured, wounded people coming back. Also remember, PTSD, TBI can be temporary, frequently is, and symptoms will wane, particularly with something like employment. And one thing I like to tell and remind the veterans is, even if they were injured, if they lost a limb, if they're coming back with PTSD, we have a list of non-technical soft skills and traits highly desirable in the civilian world: promptness, being on time, being able to learn quickly, surviving in stress. I showed them the list. I said, I don't care what you may have lost over there or what you may have gotten from your service. You see these skills, that bullet never touched these. And these are in high demand and are highly needed in this country. Go out and use them. And we can install a ramp if you're in a wheelchair, a sit-stand desk for whatever you might need, but we can't find character and leadership. And that's what this population is bringing, along with any injuries they may have. I
could not think of a more perfect closing statement than that. So Thank you so much to my amazing co-moderator, Jenna, and our three panelists here today for sharing your expertise with us in this engaging discussion. I personally have learned so much from our hour together, and undoubtedly this will also spark many additional conversations for today's attendees. So hopefully this has a continued ripple effect for additional discussion of organizational culture and ways to support veteran mental health in the workplace. So thank you so much, everybody on the line here. And I'm going to pass it back to Ms. Jackie Winters to close us out today.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, panelists. I would say that, one word I'm sort of left with after this incredible set of conversations and presentations is feeling empowered. I think whether it is reflecting at the corporate level on the 13 questions that Dr. Miller challenged us with, or reflecting at the individual level on the idea of being the exception, the idea of being more empathetic. I think that the reality is, as we heard today, every single person within an organization can and should play a role in improving the lives and opportunities of our veterans and our people with disabilities. An outstanding conversation. I think really in closing, I think Greg really pointed out how all of us have been on this journey to accommodate everyone for the last couple of years. And I think it's been a real eye-opener on the possibilities. It's also engaged everyone from CEO down to line manager to have the conversation of accommodations. And so it gives us this unique time to really continue to push the conversation and to consider how we are approaching those things for our people. So thank you very much. I want to thank Andrea Hall. I want to thank Dr. Matt Miller, our panelists, Dr. Pelton, Greg DeLapp, Dr. Anspen, our panel facilitators, Megan and Jenna, and David and Ryan, who are behind this. And thank you to everyone who joined in over the last 2 hours. Hopefully you also took away some great insights. And we will welcome you if you can join us again tomorrow. So with that, Gifty, can you close us out?
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to continuing to engage in the future. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.